Ask anybody who's watched the show Erased and they'll probably agree that it started off well, but where it starts to get divisive is when you pop the question, is Erased a good show? A lot of people would say no to this question simply because of how the show ended. This is indicative of the anime community's tendency to judge the overall merits of a story based solely on how it ends. In the case of Erased specifically, you might hear people say that because it's a mystery, they place more importance on the ending, because a mystery is all about the end result. But that's not really true. This is cliche, but in every case, the journey to get somewhere is just as important as the final destination. You can have the most shocking plot twist in the world and it'll fall completely flat if you don't also have the proper build-up. Why did I say all of this? I don't fucking know. It has nothing to do with this video really, since I think all of the endings I'm going to be talking about are at least serviceable and most of them are actually pretty good and satisfying conclusions to their shows. Going back to my unrelated rant at the beginning of the video, let's talk about Erased. In that tirade, I, as well as many others, classified that show as a mystery, but that's not entirely accurate to what kind of show it actually is. When I think about some of the best and most memorable moments in Erased, I think of stuff like Kaio breaking down at the sight of a home-cooked meal, Satoru and Kaio celebrating their birthdays together with their friends, and all of Satoru's friends banding together to protect Kaio, scenes that move away from the bleak tone of the future and towards something more desirable. I've just coined this phrase, but Erased is a feel-good mystery, and what that means is that the appeal of Erased is seeing these characters that you like and are attached to getting closer to a better future. Straight up, if you don't like the characters in this anime, you won't like the anime in general. If anything, the mystery isn't important at all, it's just a vehicle for these very touching character interactions. They use the mystery as a framing device to make the audience more interested in this idea of going back in time to fix your past mistakes. I don't give a shit that Mr. Yashiro turned out to be the killer. It was obvious as fuck. Just look at the way they present him. It's not like they were trying to keep it a secret. The only other reason they would make him this obvious is to turn him into a red herring, but they didn't do that. If the entire experience was predicated on the mystery elements of the show, then why do they place so much emphasis on the character's happiness, in showing the differences between the first episode where Satoru was clearly shown to dislike his position in life, and the last where he finds himself in a much better place than he was in the beginning. Even though the end to the mystery was lackluster, these epilogue scenes are satisfying because we're interested in what happened to these characters. We want to see them move on and have better lives. We want them to be happy because that's the appeal of the show. Moving on to something else, Jun Maeda's shows have a reputation of either sticking the landing at the end or failing miserably, and a lot of people say that Charlotte falls into the latter category. I'm guessing that the last episode is where people started to have problems with it, and to be honest, I can see why people would say that this is a rushed ending, but that's not really the case. Actually, I think objectively speaking, this is one of the more well-made episodes of the show, in terms of direction and actually putting you into the headspace of the main character, showing the deterioration of a person's mental state and how this incredibly arduous task is affecting him. It works pretty well. If you look at the things that happen on a surface level, then yeah, traveling around the entire world to steal the abilities of a shit ton of people is a lot to happen in one episode. There might even be some lost potential in exploring some moral dilemmas in stealing people's powers, but that's not the kind of story this episode is trying to tell. That's not where the emotional draw of this ending comes from. The dramatic tension of this final episode comes from whether or not the protagonist will make it back to his love interest, or if he'll even remember her at all. That's the only thing that needs to be paid attention to, and once you focus on that, the episode as a whole is a lot less all over the place. It doesn't matter how much time you're given to cover something as long as you have a solid understanding of what makes something dramatically effective, and I think the writer of the show was smart to make the process of ridding the world of these supernatural abilities more of a thing happening in the background, placing more focus on the separation of the two main characters. When you lay out the underlying drama of this episode and examine how the show handles it, one episode is actually plenty of fucking time to handle a simple story like this, and the quickness with how the main character moves through all of these countries doesn't detract from the most important part of this finale. And yeah, there are some logical problems with this ending. It's just unrealistic to have the main character travel across the entire world in the span of what's at most 2 years. Some of the people he's stealing abilities from are adults, which goes against the show's own rules, and the main character picks up some very convenient powers to solve certain problems that he has. But endings don't have to make logical sense. I mean, look at Clannad's ending. I don't know what the fuck happened to bring Nagisa back from the dead, but everybody still loves that ending because it was emotional, it was dramatically effective, and the same is true for Charlotte, just in a more understated way. Now moving on, look, I've already defended the ending to the 2003 adaptation of FMA multiple times, so I don't know if I really should here, but I'm gonna do it anyway. When it comes to the ending of FMA, a lot of people take issue with the alternate reality plot twist, so let's talk about that. On the surface, it's an idea that sounds kind of stupid in the world of FMA, but when you look closely at the themes that 2003 explores, dreams versus reality, it becomes much easier to understand why this kind of twist exists in the show. It's made clear that the dreamlike ending where everybody ends up happy and everything's perfect does not exist, that what the brothers have to do in order to fix their mistakes comes with immense sacrifice. That's the reality of the situation, and throwing Ed into the real world completely shatters the way he looks at the situation and how he views the concept of equivalent exchange. Most people get too caught up in the logic behind what happens here and forget to take into account what this ending actually does for the story. Some people may say that it's not so much the logic as it is the abruptness of this twist and how it comes out of nowhere, but even if it wasn't cleverly foreshadowed in episode 29 when Ed was being pulled through the gate in a flashback, I'd argue that the sheer aura of mystery surrounding the gate and how it's presented is enough to justify this kind of jarring and otherworldly twist. If the gate led to another fantastical world instead of literal World War II, people might have been more receptive to it since the gate is portrayed as this very strange and inhuman entity, but if they had done that, this twist would have lost a lot of the significance it had to the themes being explored. I also think that while this twist is jarring, it does a good job of establishing a connection to the world the rest of the story took place in by explaining where the energy used to perform transmutations comes from. Again, on a surface level, it may seem like Ed never learned his lesson because he chooses to perform one last transmutation to bring back Al, but this is completely different from when he did this for his mom. It's not like he's expecting things to go perfectly and using cheap groceries as a substitute for a whole ass person. He's prepared to give up everything, including his own life. Most of the emotional draw of the show comes from the bond between these brothers and how much they really mean to each other. So Ed's final transmutation serves as a good dramatic climax to the show. The two brothers end up being separated from each other, but this is still a very hopeful ending. After all, even though Ed had to pay a price, he's still alive and the two brothers stay optimistic that they'll be reunited eventually. There's even a hopeful connotation to the bleak setting that Ed finds himself in. Even though life isn't perfect and you won't always get the result you were hoping for, that doesn't mean everything you've done to get it is meaningless. It's a very nice message to explore. Throughout the entire show, they portray life in a very realistic way, so this alternate reality twist is still in line with how the anime presents itself, which is why I think it's a very fitting end to the story that they were trying to tell. It may seem like they explored these ideas too quickly, but again, the episode length doesn't have anything to do with the quality of these story beats. You just need to look at how they actually serve the point the show is trying to make. Now for our next anime, look, I've defended the original adaptation of Shaman King on my channel before, so I don't know if I should really do it here, but I've already done the same joke for FMA. All I want to really say is that there was no need to show who became the Shaman King. The main appeal of this show was Hao and the lovable cast of characters, and since Hao died at the end of the original Shaman King, there was no need for the story to continue. And no, Hao was not ruined in the 2000s anime for Shaman King. He was a perfect villain and entertaining as hell. That's why I don't care that the story doesn't continue after the point he died. And the way the show ends is basically just a duel of fates between the hero and villain that was being built up for the entirety of the second half of the show. Exactly the kind of ending that I would expect from how the story was presenting itself. Looking at this anime as its own thing, this is a perfectly serviceable climax to the show, made even better by the incredible cast of colorful characters that makes you feel attached to the events that transpire. When I see people complaining about this ending, I have no fucking clue what they're talking about since unlike FMA, there was no big twist or anything that would immediately catch the attention of people watching. I think the only people mad about the ending for the 2000s anime were the manga readers, but again, looking at it as its own thing, this is a pretty great finale. This last one isn't too serious, like I don't really care about this one, but I just don't get why people hate the ending for Btooom. Like, am I missing something? Did Madhouse come out with an OVA after the show wrapping everything up? Am I crazy? The ending to the Btooom anime was in the manga, and it isn't even an ending. I thought it was perfectly clear that this was meant to be some kind of cliffhanger that would be picked up on by the next season. The show never got a second season, so I can see how people would misinterpret this as government interference, the killing game being cut short, and the finale being anticlimactic, but even people who have read the manga seem to hate this. But I don't get it. They should know that this wasn't meant to be the ending to the entire thing. Like, usually if something is faithful to the manga, people think that's good, right? Why is it bad here? I seriously don't get it. Please, let me know if there's something that I just completely blanked from my memory. Maybe the real ending to the anime was lost to time or something? This is just so strange and so illogical that I must be wrong, right? I must be talking about the wrong scene, right? Like, there's no way this helicopter scene is the one that people take issue with. Right? Like, I don't even like Btooom that much. I just don't get the logic of these people. There's no consistency here at all. You can see it for yourself. This was in the manga. Just because the anime never got a second season, that doesn't mean this is the end of the story. I'm fucking done. That's all, and I'll be going now.